experience fun and joy while note-taking, then everything else just gets quicker and easier and enhances our day-to-day life. Unfortunately, taking notes and then managing that knowledge, especially if you're doing it for a work or school program where success in knowledge management is also crucial to your personal success, can be a really stressful and high-pressure activity. Not only because our ability to manage knowledge might be make or break for our project, but also just because all of us are constantly inundated with tons of overwhelming information every day, and thinking about how to organize that information and convert it into personal knowledge can be very overwhelming. What's more, if you are just managing knowledge for work or school, that lack of autonomy in what you're doing and the information you're taking in and how you're converting it into personal knowledge can lead to things like burnout and a lack of enthusiasm in what you're doing, making ultimately note-taking feel like a chore, but I am here to help you fix that. Because I love note-taking, I love organizing my notes, I love knowledge management. I think to love it, it's gotta be simple, it's gotta work for you, and you've gotta tap into your own emotions about that process. So in this video, I want to give you some strategies to make knowledge management more relevant and personal to you, and to reduce information overload and the pressure to be perfect. Plus, I want to offer some strategies to make learning and building knowledge actually fun, and all of these things should hopefully open up some space for joy in the knowledge management process, and I'd like to thank Kat, one of my commenters and subscribers, for suggesting this video idea for me because it's a great idea. Personally, I realized far too deep into my learning and self-organization of that learning that if the learning and the organization didn't spark joy, I was just going to have to throw out that knowledge because it wasn't useful to me. Marie Kondo style. So I have spent a long time trying to figure out how to enjoy the note-taking process. It's taken me literal years, maybe a decade actually, but I've finally found something that works for me and I enjoy the process, and I want to give that back to you in videos like these. I was doing some self-reflection, and for me, it came down to 3 things. Firstly, find the right tools. For me, that tool has been the Zettelkasten methodology of knowledge management. You can check out my video, I'll link it below. And the tool I use that in is Obsidian, which is just a simple, minimal, on my desktop workflow that works perfectly for Zettelkasten integration. For you, those might be different tools, and I'll get into more specifics in a second. The second thing is to be honest about your interests and your feelings. This is a tricky one. There's no easy way to do it. You really have to tap into how you're feeling in your body about the notes that you're taking. For a long time, I was taking notes for other people, aka my teachers, and I was asking myself what they wanted me to write instead of asking myself what I was interested in writing. And it was really hard for me to differentiate those things because I wanted to write what the teacher wanted me to write. So in a moment, we're also going to talk about tapping into your own interests and emotions around note-taking. And then thirdly, develop interest in the process itself. This is kind of a meta thing. Rather than just grow my knowledge, I want to grow my community around the management of knowledge. No one's going to have exactly the same knowledge interests as me, but maybe we can grow as a community by talking about how we manage that knowledge in similar ways. And that is what I'm doing on this YouTube channel, so thank you for joining me. There's also something in this point about learning how you learn, which is just going to make learning more smooth for you and therefore more enjoyable as well. Those are the 3 things that helped me eliminate everything from my knowledge management process that wasn't conducive to enjoyment, confidence, comfort, and engagement. Let's dive into them a little bit deeper. Firstly, the right tools. This for me comes down to your methodology of note-taking and knowledge management, and then the technology that you're using to do that. Let's talk about methodology. For a long time, I was looking at methods of note-taking. So these are like the small isolated things that you would do while taking notes, but it didn't tell you an overarching philosophy about how you should think about those notes or organize those notes. So I tried things like the Cornell method or mind mapping or individual methods of writing things down that I thought would eventually solve my problem. It would eventually make note-taking fun and easy and flow for me. But that never happened. until I realized what I needed was a methodology of note-taking and knowledge management. And that is when I found the Zettelkasten system. When I first heard about the Zettelkasten system, everything just fell into place. It clicked with me. It was intuitive. It was natural to the way that I understood the world. It honestly aligned with my research interests in university, and it just felt right, and I knew that this was the thing. You might not know immediately, you might have to give it a go a little bit. I mean, I gave many note-taking methods a go before I found the Zettelkasten methodology, but search for the right system. With the right system, with a process that you can trust, everything does get easier and more fun. And then the second part of that is finding the right technology. And for me, it was important to find a piece of technology where the Zettelkasten system really flowed, where it was seamless integration of the Zettelkasten method into the technology. For some people, that's going to be paper and pen. Personally, I tried paper and pen, and then I tried Notion, and then I tried Foam, a free Roam research alternative, and then finally I landed on Obsidian, which felt very similar to Foam, but was easier for me to understand. So again, you might want to try out a couple different pieces of technology until one of them really clicks with the methodology that you've chosen. And then once you've found the right methodology, you found the right technology to use, you can then optimize that process and that technology. For me, the way that I engage with the Zettelkasten system is constantly changing to meet my needs. I'm learning new things about how I learn, and then I'm adapting my method accordingly. And on the technology side, I'm very slowly learning more about Obsidian, adding occasional community plugins. I changed the color of my Obsidian to pink. I changed the font size depending on how I'm feeling and how much focus I have that day. I'm adding folders that make sense for me. You can add tags, whatever it is that is going to make this system make sense for you within the technology that you've chosen. And also make it beautiful, if that is what appeals to you, because honestly, you have to look at this thing for many hours every day probably, so it should look appealing to you. Even if appealing is like very minimal. For me, it's dark mode, pink highlights, and very minimal. Low plugins. If you're using paper and pen, maybe you want to use some washi tape, some stickers, some highlighters, whatever works for you. None of us are judging. Another aspect of the right tools is how you essentially gamify your note-taking and knowledge management. I personally like being able to see my progress. I like to be able to see the notes pile up. So when I go to my file folder and see how many notes I have in Obsidian and it's more than the last time I was note-taking, that brings me a little bit of joy. That gets me excited to make more notes. I want to see how big I can build my vault. Or looking at my local graph view, that looks very cool. The more complex it is, the more knowledgeable I feel, and that makes me feel confident and competent and excited to know more. So gamify your approach in some way or quantify it in some way, whatever works for you. Having good drinks and snacks around, that also always makes everything fun. My second rule for enjoying your note-taking process is tap into your feelings and interests. Like I said, I've always found it hard to identify what I'm interested in because I have always been in school where I know what I'm producing is going to be graded by a person, and so I want to try to optimize what I'm submitting for their interests rather than my own. I do not recommend that approach to school. So if you have to manage knowledge that someone else is telling you you have to develop, they've given you information and said, you have to remember this, you have to internalize this, you have to turn this information into your personal knowledge, then it's worth asking yourself, what about this sparks joy for me? Or where can I use this information outside of my immediate project? When else might I find this a useful piece of information? Or what does this information connect to that I already know and is already in my system so that I can develop and build upon it and then feel like I'm building up to something? What am I drawn to in this? Why might that be? So asking those questions about yourself when you're given a piece of information that you have to turn into knowledge and track and organize in your system, asking these questions is going to help you find your interests, but also every answer to those questions can be a note in your system itself. Asking those questions is already you developing knowledge about that information, even if the information looks boring on the surface. Everything you're going to put into your Zettelkasten, everything that somebody else asks you to take notes about, or you know you need to take notes about, ask what about this thing interests you. Okay, the second part of that, we've developed interest. Even when you have interest in a topic, sometimes you're not going to want to write about that topic. It's just not, you're not going to feel it, right? You're gonna feel burnt out, you're gonna feel stressed, overwhelmed, whatever. Maybe even especially if you're interested in it because you want to do the idea justice. So I do love juggling, but sometimes because I'm writing my dissertation about it, I start to feel anxiety bubbling up when I go to take notes about juggling. I used to ignore that feeling and just plow through, or I felt bad about myself because juggling should be something I enjoy. Why do I now dislike it? Or sometimes that anxiety would bubble up so I would just stop working. I'd be like, I don't know why, but I can't work on that now. And then I wasn't getting work done on my project. So instead, now I acknowledge that feeling of anxiety and I figure out why I'm feeling that way. And then I tell myself, that makes sense. And that is okay. It is okay to sometimes feel stressed and anxious about note-taking and knowledge management. You can show yourself compassion and be understanding with yourself when things aren't fun and aren't enjoyable. And then, acknowledging that this might be difficult for me today, I ease myself in really slowly, maybe with some work that is easier to do, like transferring quotes from a book into my Obsidian, instead of trying to develop new knowledge about those quotes. Almost always, if I just start somewhere and show myself compassion, then I end up actually getting work done. And if I don't, that's okay. Some days are just like that. And my third point, which is a meta-enjoyment in the process of learning and in note-taking itself. Like I said, I have spent like a decade trying to figure out an appropriate note-taking method for myself, and even though note-taking was like a struggle throughout that period, the process of finding a method was pretty enjoyable. I've always loved trying to figure out what the best organizational system is for ideas. And now that I've actually found something, I enjoy trying to relay that finding to you through this YouTube channel. And then I enjoy when you all comment your deep, insightful thoughts in the comment section below, like Kat did when they recommended this video. Learning about your own learning style is, first of all, just going to benefit your learning because it's going to make things easier for yourself if you acknowledge how you learn, but also it will empower you to learn more because you know the way in. And ultimately, if you have to intake information and transform it into personal knowledge and then store that knowledge, and that knowledge is just boring as heck and you hate it, even in that moment, you can ask yourself, what is like the best way I could optimize organizing boring knowledge? And then that meta enjoyment of optimizing the organizational process or the note-taking process is enough to fuel me into internalizing the knowledge itself, even though it's boring as heck. So watching videos like this, developing community around these tools, figuring out your own personal learning style, these are already all great steps towards developing an enjoyment for and finding fun in the knowledge management process. If you have any other tips for people, I would love to read about them in the comments section below, and I'll see you in another video soon. Bye, everybody!